They're going to come your way. So much so that you won't know what to do when they come your way. So many of them are going to be coming down, beating down your door, because you have the one thing they don't have. You have stability. Why? Because you have the understanding of this truth, this knowledge, which is going to keep you stable. Isaiah 33:6, the scriptures do not lie, brothers.
And wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times, and strength of salvation. The fear of the Lord is his treasure.
I told you, two things that have brought these women to astronomical heights of pride. That's the feminism and social media, man. And you can't compete with that. You can't compete with that. Okay? So what's your next course of action? You know it's not going to last forever. Social media and feminism is not going to last forever. What's going to destroy social media and feminism? When all hell breaks loose. Now the ball is going to be in our court. Now these women are going to run us down because they're going to need one thing: guidance and protection. That's where we come in. And it really won't matter what you look like, as long as you're a real man and you can stand in the face of adversity and you have guidance and protection, or they're going to run you down, man. All kind of beautiful bitches are going to run you down, man. It's going to make your head spin. Okay? Come on, brothers. Come on.
Isaiah 4. And in that day, 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, We will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel. Only let us be called by thy name, to take away our reproach. In that day shall the branch of the Lord be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the earth shall be excellent and comely for them that are escaped of Israel.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, we would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Kakodash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples for his younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutation to the hopefully out there pushing his word and truth and in sincerity across the 4 winds in the name of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah. All right, we are the Brothers GMS Mississippi Camp coming with another weekly lesson, and it's just following up, dealing with this guy Matt Walsh, as he went on that rant on X the other day, pretty much taking pride in what his ancestors, his forefathers came over here and done, all right, to the northern tribes, and these devils speak from a position as if they have always had this high moral ground, okay, as if they was always everything they did was in righteousness, even the slaughtering of the northern tribes that was over here, and they present themselves as if they are the standard of righteousness in the earth, and when they do wickedness, it's for the better of humanity, when it's the exact opposite, man. Okay, we have to understand the nature of an Edomite, okay, which I have a lesson. I was just listening to our boy Shaheed. He went in on the violent nature of Esau Edom. He went into some numbers, all right, but what the world has to understand, all right, that this man is the wicked, and that there is no nation on earth that's more wicked than him, that's more deceptive and more violent than him, okay? And that's this man's nature. So what we're going to go through is this period called the Spanish Inquisition, Okay, and it goes to show you how these devils shove, all right, Christianity, in the form of Roman Catholicism, which is the mother of all these Christian denominations, okay, that's in the earth now, okay. But it shows you how, they took this Roman Catholicism, and remixed it with the sword, okay. When you go into the scriptures, that's off, okay. And we're gonna start off with this scripture here. You can read that, bro.
Can you hear me, bro?
Yeah, I get you.
Con. This is the book of Romans, chapter 13 and verse 10. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law.
Yeah, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. And it said love worketh no ill towards his neighbor. Now these Christians will come, and push love, 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 and they'll call us a hate group for just reading precepts. But here it is, this man, all right, tortured people on behalf, of Christ, and Mother Mary. Okay. And it's cool. It's just something that happened. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But when we bring out a precept, Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated, all of a sudden, okay, we're the biggest threat to society. Okay. So we're going to get into this, all right, and we're going to bring out some more precepts to show you how these devils are very hypocritical. Okay. Well, the way that they move has nothing to do with the Bible. The Bible has always just been a decoy. All right. And this man is just inhumane. We're going to get that definition. I'm going to look it up over here for inhumane, But you had some, bro, before we play the video.
No, go ahead, bro. I'm gonna bring out some precepts once we get into it. Go ahead.
Okay, come. So let's let this play and turn it up some more.
Today, most of us live in a world where we're free to pursue whatever spiritual path we see fit and worship whatever god or gods we fancy without fear of reprisal or persecution. That was not the case for medieval Europe, however, when starting in the 12th century, the Catholic Church launched a bloody inquisition that would last for hundreds of years and see tens of thousands of people tortured and executed, all in the name of their version of God. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Infographic Show. Today we're taking a look at some of the greatest horrors of the Inquisition. Christianity, originally conceived in ancient Israel, was at its inception persecuted as heresy by the Jewish leaders of the time. Jesus was famously humiliated, beaten, and ultimately crucified for his claims that he was the living Son of God. And after his death, his closest followers went into hiding until, fueled by their belief that Jesus had risen from the dead as promised and thus proved that he was the Son of God, they began to spread.
Listen, if you're making great money, but you know you'll never have the freedom to serve God in the way that he's calling you to,
their beliefs in Jesus as Savior. This led to their becoming known as Christians. And the original disciples, many would suffer terrible fates at the hands of the Jewish leadership. Over 1,000 years later, though, Christianity to Jews for their beliefs. Yet Christianity was being challenged from both within and without, with many Christians deeply unhappy with the Vatican's abuses of power and
what we have to understand, all right, is that, as he's using this term Christian loosely, all right, the followers of Yahushua, all right, were Israelites. And they were deemed, Christians in Antioch, okay, which was a city, ancient, what was Antioch? Let me look it up. But nevertheless, so what you have with this word Christianity now before, because the followers of Yahushua began to grow and grow and grow within the Roman Empire, to a point to what they call the Jews or the spell from Rome when you go into the book of Acts. So you have Christianity, all right, the true followers of Yahushua, Israelites converting, all right, to belief in Yahushua. Now you had the persecution of what they call the Christians from the time of Nero all the way to the time of Domitian. And even you had, some Jake emperors, that persecuted Christianity, even during the time of the five good emperors. So from the time of Yahushua until the time of Constantine, okay, Christianity, was persecuted in the Roman Empire. So, and these were Jakes. So after, Constantine, he did a fake conversion as a believer to solidify, his empire between the pagans and the Christians, because the Christian population had become big. So he had to please them and fake like he converted. So you had post Constantine Christians, and that's where you get the paganism building up to the Roman Catholic Church that we see today. And you have, Edomites, take hold of Christianity during the Renaissance, mainly from Spain and Portugal, which this is where you get the Spanish Inquisition. So at this time, you have, Edomites, okay, they have taken hold of Christianity, all right, and it was a political move. It wasn't that they believed in the Bible, which we're going to show you through their actions, and we're going to compare it to the Bible and show you there's a big difference, So just to clarify that, because he's using the term Christian, loosely. So, let's get back into it.
Calling into question problematic Catholic dogma. Others who simply wanted to worship God in their own ways were also threatening the power and influence of the church, and that could not be tolerated. Publicly proclaiming that there could be only one road to God and all else was dangerous heresy that threatened to steer people away from God's love, the Inquisition was launched in the late 12th century. Though sadly the truth was that the church was more concerned with securing its own power and wealth rather than the souls of the faithful it claimed were being threatened. The inquisitors were specially trained priests who were instructed in the art of discovering heresy and rooting it out, then extracting penance and confessions from heretics, almost always through torture. When an inquisitor arrived in town, he would immediately announce his presence to the local population and would give citizens present a chance to admit their heresy. If they did, then they would be doled out a punishment befitting their level of heresy, everything from a forced pilgrimage to holy sites in Rome to severe whippings which could scar a person for life. For inquisitors, true penance could only be achieved through deep pain. Thus, most inquisitors would make use of special bullwhips, which would come with small metal beads at the end, in order to deeply lacerate flesh. Others still used a tool known as a cat of nine tails, which was a whip with 9 extensions, typically with each one inlaid with pieces of sharpened metal. The wounds would be so severe that often those receiving this punishment would die from infection or be crippled afterwards. Those that survived bore the scars for life, their backs forever disfigured by the horrible whipping. This was, of course, lighter punishment reserved for those.
It's here. This is it. The federal government just come out with some new regulations that allows you to buy real estate with less money.
Those who freely confessed. If one did not confess, the inquisitor would immediately begin their investigation, calling in local townsfolk for one-on-one meetings. Citizens were encouraged to speak up about the heretical practices of their neighbors, and once accused, there was often little evidence needed to determine guilt. This led to many cases of revenge in the form of false accusations by angry neighbors, or perhaps just by individuals who coveted the lands and even the wives of others for themselves. With the scantest proof of heresy, one could convince an inquisitor that their neighbor was a horrible heretic, deserving of the fires of hell itself. Of course, the church itself hardly ever needed much incentive to persecute people as heretics. Count Raymond VII of Toulouse would regularly burn people at the stake for heresy, even if they had confessed when given an opportunity, because often those who were persecuted were Jews, Muslims, or other religious minorities. The process of killing them was little more than a handy way to cleanse the population of undesirables. That included gays who were persecuted under the laws of sodomy and brutally tortured before being killed. In the Kingdom of Aragon in Spain, the Inquisition only stopped giving out the death penalty for sodomy after almost 1,000 trials, most of which ended with torture and death for the accused. Diego Rodriguez Lucero, an inquisitor named the Bringer of Darkness, operated from 1499 to 1506 and routinely used the power of his position for self-gain. Once, he sent an innocent man named Julian Trigueros to burn at the stake so that he could take the man's wife for himself after his death. And later, when he desired one of his many mistresses for himself, he sent her husband and parents to burn at the stake. Nobody was safe from Lucero, and in 1 year, 1506, he handed out 100 death sentences. Eventually, the Marquis of Cordoba sent his army to attack Lucero's prison and set all inside of it free. Unfortunately, Lucero escaped, but he was so hated and thoroughly corrupt that the Grand Inquisitor in Rome had him arrested 2 years later, because trying Lucero for corruption would be the Catholic Church as the pot calling the kettle black. Lucero was quickly released, and in a frustrating lack of karmic justice would die peacefully in Seville that same year. For the Inquisitor, extracting confessions was paramount, and it mattered little whether they were real or false. Inevitably, the accused would face one of many different forms of punishment, which weren't meant to actually punish the individual, but rather to just get them to confess. One of the preferred methods of exacting confessions was called strappado. In this form of torture, an individual would have their hands tied behind their back and the rope attached to a pulley. They were then raised so that they would hang from their arms, which would inevitably lead to the shoulders being pulled out of their sockets. Often, the Inquisitor would raise the victim up high and suddenly drop them before catching their fall, forcing the body to jerk violently. As if this wasn't enough, weights would often be tied to the person's feet to make the hanging even more painful. The rack was yet another popular tool of the Inquisition, and a very effective one at that. Here, the subject had their hands and feet tied or chained up to rollers at one or perhaps both ends of a wooden frame. The Inquisitor would then slowly turn the rollers with a handle, which pulled on the ropes or chains and stretched the victim's arms and legs until they dislocated. Sometimes the process would simply continue until limbs were torn off completely. Even though mutilation was forbidden by the Church, in 1256 Pope Alexander IV gave inquisitors the power to forgive each other for any wrongdoing they committed during their torture sessions. This meant that the inquisitors were free to add any form of torture they could dream up to victims who were enduring the torture of strappado or the rack, and thus they often did, because why waste a good chance to mutilate someone? If confessions weren't forthcoming, or perhaps the Inquisitor didn't quite believe they were honest enough, they could get inventive with their bound-up prisoner. This would include the use of devices such as the boot, which was a wooden-framed shoe that was placed on the foot of a victim and was slowly tightened until eventually it crushed the bones of the feet and lower legs. Another popular device was the thumbscrew, which was made up of small inserts for each of the fingers on a hand, which were gradually tightened until they crushed the finger bones completely. For women, one of the most horrific implements of torture was known as the breast ripper, which was nothing more than a prong-like iron device which would be heated in a fire and then affixed over each breast, with the Inquisitor violently ripping away the breast tissue until there was little more left than a mass of cauterized tissue. All of these were things the victims would suffer, along with their normal torture, and designed to not just extract confessions, but ensure that the guilty would be forever marked by the ordeal. The Judas chair was number 3 of the top 3 torture devices used by the Inquisition, and consisted of a pyramid-like seat with a sharpened point at the top, upon which the accused sat. The point of the pyramid was forced into the anus or the vagina, and the Inquisitor would gradually force the victim down upon the device by lowering them from above by ropes they were attached to. Sometimes the ropes were attached from below, allowing the Inquisitor to turn a crank and slowly force the accused down onto the device. Ironically, this was seen as the most humane of the 3 main methods of torture, and this would rarely lead to death and instead would disfigure the person and create lifelong difficulties walking. For women, it would basically make childbearing all but impossible. A milder form of punishment was known as the heretic's fork, and was an ingenious device which consisted of a 2-pronged fork-like device. The device would be tied around the person's neck, and one end of the fork would be placed below the neck, digging into the lower jaw. The other end of the fork would be gouged into the flesh of the chest, securely holding it in place. Thus, the victim would be unable to move their head forward at all without impaling themselves, and the act of speaking was excruciatingly painful. Victims would often be left like this for days before trials, in order to encourage their cooperation, even if those trials more often than not ended in being burned at the stake. For any who wished to avoid their ultimate fate by trying to impale themselves on the fork, the prongs were placed in such a way that doing so was impossible and would only lead to even more pain instead. The Nuremberg Virgin, or Iron Maiden as it's often known, was a sarcophagus-like device in the shape of a woman, with a Virgin Mary placed atop it by the Inquisitors to symbolize the triumph of Christianity over heresy and dissidents. Models differed, but in essence they all worked the same way. The victim was shoved inside it and then had the door thrown shut. In some models, the inside of the maiden was rigged with spikes several inches long. In others, there were no spikes, but instead small holes through which long nails could be thrust through. In order to keep a victim from dying too fast, though, the spikes or nails were situated in such a way that they did not pierce any vital organs, thus ensuring the victim could stay alive for a long period of time. Models differ, but generally, the victim was stabbed through in both the shoulders, lower back, in 3 places across the chest, on each buttock, and once in the stomach. Some models had special slots for inserting nails that would impale the victim through the eyes, but not so deeply as to penetrate into the brain. Inquisitors may throw someone inside and leave them until they died of their wounds, the victim trapped in the enclosed space and unable to move without deepening the wounds they are already suffering. Other Inquisitors would slam the door to the maiden open and shut several times, stabbing the victim through over and over again. Curiously, this device was meant to symbolize the victim entering into the embrace of the Virgin Mary herself, an act that symbolizes the Catholic Church's absolution of the accused's sins. The Spanish Inquisition was a time of legalized horror inflicted upon the religious minorities of Europe, mostly Jews, pagans, and Muslims. Often the motivations were nothing more than a desire for more wealth and power, with the Church seizing the assets of the accused, even if they were allowed to live after the accusation. Men in power who coveted the wives or lands of others would send innocent men to be executed, and jealous lovers betrayed their partners to the Inquisitors for revenge. While the Inquisition was meant to combat sin, it ironically only ended up enabling some of the greatest sins in European history. Today, the world casts a mistrustful eye toward organized religion.
So way before, all right, the Taliban, which the CIA, started that. All right, you had European governments, okay, that were terrorizing the earth. Okay, so I got a few precepts I want to get and to show you the contradiction, all right, of these Edomites. Well, first, before I get that, let's go here, because one of the things that Esau loves to claim, his claim is that he civilized the earth. Okay, well, let's go to the word civilized. All right, and you had, in the medieval times, Jake, had, torture tactics. Jake came up with different torture tactics. Jake that was in power, okay, but it wasn't for the sake of forcing, all right, Roman Catholicism, all right, on the masses, man. And these devils, okay, they did these things, as you say, out of greed, okay, out of wealth, and pretty much as a power grab, okay. But they knew that the masses of the people, all right, were into Christianity, so they used Christianity as just a decoy, for a power grab and a money grab, okay, as they was devils were coming back into power. So you got this word civilized. Can you see it, bro?
Come.
Yeah, you can read it, bro.
Come, this is the word civilized in adjective form. It says at an advanced stage of social or cultural development.
Yep. So when you read definition 2.
Definition 2, his complete opposite of Esau, polite and well-mannered.
Yep, polite and well-mannered, courteous, gracious, culture, cultivated, polished. Okay. And here it is, and then like I said, people could just lie, just based on, you have an argument with your neighbor, and this nigga can say that you're a heretic. All right. And the inquisitor come see about you, man. So it would just, organize, all right, disorganized terrorism, man. Okay. And this is what they was doing in Europe, and they brought that over here to the New World, as they call it. All right, and we're going to look at a map. Now, one of the biggest things that Esau loves to say about all the other governments of the other nations, especially, with Ishmael, is that they're inhumane. Okay, but when you go into this word inhumane, who does this fit? especially seeing what we just seen. Who does inhumane fit? All right, so you can read that, bro.
Inhumane and adjective form, without compassion for misery or suffering, cruel.
Yeah, so based on what we just seen, was that not inhumane? And this what this man brought over here to the new world, to a people, okay, that he called savages, okay, but they wasn't doing that to each other,
Mm-hmm.
okay, because you go into inhumane, it goes into what some of the words is savage, monstrous, barbaric, all right, barbarous, diabolical, you see, sadistic, okay. So he's quick to put these terms, okay, on these other leaders, and CNN, speak about the inhumane leaders, and Gaddafi and Saddam, and the
Con,
Bin Ladens and all these different characters. All right, well, there's no one that's more inhumane than Esau Edom, whether he does it covertly by dropping bombs, or whether he just poison your food supply, okay, and oppress you, with poverty, man. Okay, there's no one that's more inhumane than Esau Edom. You can say something, bro?
bro, because every Esau calls everybody inhumane that doesn't want to be, up under him, or be a part of the shit show that he got going on. Because like we said when we got on, you go to another place on the planet, they have their own culture going on over there. You don't go over there and call them in here. They not doing the stuff Esau doing. Their culture, they may do things a little different, but they have, everybody going off, to a certain extent, but they ain't going off like Esau. You know what I'm saying? They not doing all of that bullshit Esau doing. They have their own way. They have their own government and checks and balances in the way that they do things. So you can't just pull up, on a nation of people, which is what Esau did to the northern tribes, and call them inhumane because you don't agree with what they're doing, and your standard is not backed by anything but you. You know.
And if he can deem you inhumane, that justify his sword.
Mm-hmm. And that's all he kept doing. Fuck it, bro. Go ahead.
Nah, I'm just saying, if he's able to convince the masses that you're inhumane, that just justify the sword, and him bringing the sword, and him not being looked at as the villain afterward. Okay, so I want to get this in Romans 12:17. You can read it, and we'll read to the end of the chapter. I think verse 21. You got it, bro.
This is the book of Romans, chapter 12, starting in verse 17. Recompense to a man evil, flock it. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest and in the sight of all men.
Yeah, so was this being, followed? Okay, these devils, okay, had the Bible in their hand while they was, great robbing and murdering, torturing, stealing. Okay, when do these scriptures apply?
Mm-hmm.
Show you that it was never about the Bible. It was just a decoy. Okay, and this man took the earth with the sword. Okay, with the Bible. Okay, just as the decoy to disarm. Okay, and justify, his doings. Okay, go ahead.
Come, verse 18. It says, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men.
Yeah, live peaceably with all men, if it be possible. Okay, and this devil, he took the Bible and he went and terrorized all men. Okay, he went on a global tour and terrorized all men under the banner of the Bible. Okay, when Yahweh sent forth his disciple, it was to teach. Okay, and if they wouldn't hear, okay, what you had to say, shake the dust. See, if he was following the Bible, he should have came over here, tried to preach to the northern tribes. If they didn't want to hear, he should have took his ass back home. Okay, nah, man started unloading the cannons. Okay, started putting the sickness in the blankets. What they got, smallpox. Okay, nah, man, this man waged a war, and then the Christianity that he was speaking of had nothing to do with the Bible. Okay, By that time, Christianity was extremely corrupted, watered down, and pagan. By the time this devil called himself trying to spread the gospel, and that's why he was able to just make up shit, pull things out of his ass because he didn't have no real doctrine with the Christianity that these devils, presented to the earth, man. It was just pretty much just the Bible was just vouching for his wickedness. He used the Bible to vouch for his wickedness, man. You can say something, bro.
Come on, bro, because you said the precept it said live peacefully if it be possible, and you made the point. Just kind of want to emphasize it. Esau say, we're the minister to society, but we go to work, we do our day to day. We leave work at work, home at home. You know what I'm saying? When we out there on the highways and the byways, we incorporate that balance as much as possible. But the point is, we go out and we teach. And if you hear what the scripture say, preach in season and out of season, whether they for here or for bear. So if you hear it, then it's for you. If you don't hear it, then it's not for you. You can go on about your business. We not finna tie you up and torture you and do all that there. But Esau called us a menace to society. But look at you got what this devil do, all throughout history. Time and time again, we see brothers. I will get that precept if it come down too. I think there's Proverbs 29 where it goes into when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked bear rule, the people mourn. And you can see all this. It's just no order, no structure, no discipline. If you look in the scriptures, there are checks and balances. Correct me if I'm wrong. There are checks and balances. If you have a what's the word I'm looking for? If you have something that you want to report, then that was brought to the court, to the elders, and a person would plead their case. And ain't nobody just finna send you to no dungeon and just start torturing you until you're forced to say something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's I'm trying to find this. Here you go.
What you looking for, bro?
I found it. Read this, bro. And Titus 3 and 10.
Cause this is the book of Titus, chapter 3 and verse 10. A man that is an heretic after the first and second admonishment reject. Come.
Yeah. So after you would try to witness to a person, twice, no more than twice after that, just reject. It ain't for them. And this the thing. Here it is, the Bible, okay, constantly tell us, he that have ears, let them hear. All right. Even when you go here, okay. So the method, that they brought with the Bible had nothing to do with the Bible, okay? Because of the teachings of the Messiah, okay, didn't teach, to be militant and to have an imperialistic mindset. Okay, matter of fact, I got two cuts real quick, two accounts.
Why you getting it? I got you. Go ahead.
Read Matthew 13 and 9.
This is the book of Matthew, chapter 13, verse 9. Who had ears to hear, let him hear.
Go ahead.
And the disciples came and said unto him, why speakest thou unto them in parables?
Go ahead.
And he answered unto them, he is Yahushua. He said, and he answered unto them, because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given.
Yeah, so it was understood. If someone couldn't get it, then the mystery wasn't for him. Okay, you weren't supposed to make up all these, torture devices. Okay, what was the point of it? Someone that didn't believe. All right, Yahushua never teach that. The Messiah never taught anything, okay, similar to what we seen the devil do with the Bible in their hand. Okay, and then had the nerve to call themselves civilized, man. When they're the exact opposite, they was inhumane, and they brought their inhumanity over here, okay, amongst the northern tribes. All right, you can say something, bro.
Good. You bringing that precept out just didn't know the spirit, because what I was going to say was, we know that, and that's the difference between us and Esau. We know that in these times it's only going to be for the HFE, the hopeful elect. It's only going to be for them in this time. The elect in this time. We know that. So it ain't on us to go and force nobody to believe anything, or go and force this truth on anybody, because it's not us that does it. You know, Yahweh Shema Shai does all the heavy lifting. We're just the mouthpieces. You know, we speak the word, and if it's in you, Yahweh Shema Shai is going to open your eyes up, so you're go on here. And Yahweh Shai knew that. That's why he spoke in parables, because if it was for everybody, he would have just spoken in plain speech.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, bro. And you can read this account here, in the book of Matthew, chapter 19, bro.
Come, this is the book of Matthew, chapter 19, starting at verse 16. And behold, one came and said unto him, Good master, what a good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life?
Go ahead.
Come, and he said unto him, Why callest thou me good? There is none good, but one, that is the Most High. But if thou wilt enter into life, keep the commandments.
You know, so this is a dialogue between, they call it a young rich ruler, okay, and Yahweh Shai. So he comes to Yahweh Shai, and he's inquiring about eternal life. So Yahweh Shai is telling him, you know, to keep the commandments. That's what he started off with. All right, but then there was another part that he would go into. Go ahead.
Verse 18, and he said unto him, which Yahweh Shai said, Thou shalt do no murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness,
Wait a
honor
minute.
thy mother.
So what we had amongst, you know, the Spanish Inquisition, they were doing murder, okay, and then they were doing murder, okay, for the sake of other men's wives. All right, they were stealing land, they were stealing gold, and they was bearing false witness. You see, so there was no point within the Spanish Inquisition, and it's in the Spanish Inquisition is just a, a, a a steel shot of how Esau rules the earth, you know. And Yahweh Shah said that, which we'll get it in a minute. Matter of fact, let me get it real quick, and we go back to it. You see, this sums up the devil. You see, and that's why he can never, you know, as we have been enlightened, he can never present himself, you know, in any righteous manner, because we know his nature and we understand what righteousness is now. Okay, and according to the scripture, this man, all right, is the fulfillment of anti-Messiah in the earth. Read that John 10 and 10, Bible shop.
Come, this book of John, chapter 10, verse 10. The thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy.
Mm-hmm.
I am come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly.
Yo, so this man came as the thief, and all he did was steal, kill, and destroy. That's all he does now. So here it is. Yahweh Shah is giving a rundown, okay, of what's required, okay, which, you know, those things with those that he went into the law, which when you go into those laws, we can keep those things, you know, as far as that, you know, we can't help the adultery point, you know, because, you know, there's no virgins, you know, but when you go into steal, okay, murder and bearing false witness, and, you know, don't continue in adultery, you know, don't, you know, intentionally commit adultery. You see, these are all things that we can do. You see, but Esau, he doesn't even do those, because it's not in his nature. You see, he can't pretend to be this Christian anymore that he used to pretend to be. You know, he should present himself to the earth as this people loving, all love, all, you know, Christian. You know, he just wants this utopian Christian world, okay, where everyone's unified. Nah, that's not him. That's not his nature, man. Okay, what you got, bro? Start at verse 19.
Come, verse Matthew chapter 19, verse Matthew chapter 19, verse 19. Honor thy mother and thy father, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself.
Go ahead. Hold on, wait a minute. Love thy neighbor as thyself. So would you put your neighbor? Would you torture yourself like that? You know, like this devil, you know, would torture and steal. Okay, great. Okay, so this devil showed no, you know, qualities of the scriptures, man. You got it, bro.
Mm-hmm. Cause I mean, ask like it, but it said, like you said, love thy neighbor as thyself. Would you go and lie on yourself? Would you go and put yourself through all that? And that's a different thing about us brothers, in the Akim. We look at each other that that's my brother. I'm gonna treat him exactly how I would want him to treat me. And that's for the sake of just righteousness and doing the right thing. We always say we're gonna do the work. We're gonna stay in this walk. I brought this out. That y'all by Shema Shah keep the spirit up on us. We're gonna do right by people. We're gonna do right by the brothers, and we're gonna try to live just a pretty simple life. But Esau wants the complete opposite of that.
Come on. You keep reading, bro.
Come verse back in Matthew 19 verse 20, it says a young man said unto him, all these things I have kept from my youth up, what lack I yet?
Go ahead.
And Yahweh Shai said unto him, if thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me.
Yeah, so Yahweh Shai is talking about giving up possession, showing you that these gospels are not about a money grab. Well, you got Jake and Israel to do that now. They turned this to a money grab. They turned this to a grab of power. What, even if it's just YouTube fame. But Yahweh Shai never pushed this materialistic. There's nothing wrong with having things, okay, but that was never the focal point of the ministry, okay. So these devils, they use the Bible, like say for a power grab or money grab, and they use the Bible as a witness of saying that they're right, okay, with their perverted, doctrine and twisted understanding, of the Bible, So I got what you had wanted to get something in Proverbs, bro?
Proverbs 29.
Okay, I agree. I read it for you, bro.
God,
Proverbs 29 too.
Yeah, come 29 too.
Proverbs 29:2 said, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked bear rule, the people mourn.
Come. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. So when and we'll get a chance to see that our righteous are when Yahweh shines on that throne. That anytime that you're doing your best to live according to the scriptures, according to that obedience under Yahweh Shema Shai, it's a lot of rejoicing and it's a lot of peace that comes with that. But when as we see now, when you have Esau in authority, and not even just now, we talked about it during the time of Alexander, during the Grecians, for the sake of this lesson here, the Spanish Inquisition. Every time we've seen Esau in rulership or in authority, the people have done none but mourn. There's just been wickedness all over the place. And then we watched even in the video where they would still persecute people for doing the right thing, but the people who are bearing the false witness, I think one thing he said that for they stopped doing the torture and stuff for sodomy.
Yep.
So it's backwards.
Yep. They loosened up on sodomy. That's how you know it was Esau. Because like I say, Jake, had started, because you had torture tactics during the medieval times, okay? But it was a sake of punishment, for certain offenses, against the, common law, all right, within the realm. But these devils, once they got in there, like they went crazy with it, man. Okay, and you could tell it was Esau when he started lighting up on sodomy, man, because that nigga is the ultimate freak, So, yeah, you can get this account too, bro. This is Matthew 26 and 48.
This is the book of Matthew, chapter 26 and verse 48. Now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, saying, whomsoever I shall kiss, that same is he, hold him fast.
Yeah, so this is Judas getting ready to betray Yahweh Shai. Okay, go ahead.
Verse 49. And for which he came to Yahweh Shai and said, Hail, master, and kissed him.
Go ahead.
And Yahweh Shai said unto him, friend, wherefore art thou come? Then came they and laid hands on Yahushua and took him.
So that's Yahushua being betrayed, to the Roman government, by Judas. Go ahead.
Come, verse 51. And behold, one of them which were with Yahushua stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck a servant of the high priestess and smote off his ear.
Yep. So there was a sword drawn from one of the disciples. Okay, and it smoked, off the ear of one of the servants of the high priest that was coming to grab Yahushua up. All right. So read verse 52.
Come, verse 52. Then said Yahushua unto him, put up again thy sword into his place, and for all they that take the sword shall perish by the sword.
Yeah, so Yahushua said, "What put up again, all right, thy sword into his place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword." So Yahushua, okay, he didn't promote, all right, the use of the sword within the ministry. Okay, he was all about teaching, staying out the way. Yahushua would teach, get out the way. So when one of the disciples, began to get carnal, he immediately rebuked them, man, because this ain't what this is about. Okay, now if you have, a modern day sword or weapon, there's nothing wrong. All right, and there's nothing wrong with defending yourself, man. But using the sword to so-called spread the gospel, Yahushua was never with it. Okay, and plus, this had to be done. Yahushua had to be crucified. Okay, so this is why he told Peter to fall back. I believe it was Peter that did it. He told him to fall back because this had to be done. Okay, but then he said, for a mindset, it said, "For all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword." Okay, so they're trying to live by the sword and trying to be militant. Okay, that's not linked to this ministry, man. Okay, because one thing about it, this scripture teaches us to stay out of the way of madness. Well, we don't have to be in these certain altercations and hostile places. Certain times where on the block, a few things have happened. Okay, but it's never to the point. Okay, to where we trying to raise an army. Okay, and trying to take over. All right, Arkansas. Trying to take over Texas. In the name of the Lord with the sword. Nah, that ain't that ain't the play. But guess who? Guess who was blessed to live by the sword? Let's get that. Okay. How did this devil? How was this devil blessed to live, man? So let's get to the point. Let's start at 39, Genesis 27 and 39.
Come on, it's the Genesis chapter 27, verse 39. And Isaac, his father, answered unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above.
So this the earth, being given into the hand of the wicked. Isaac blessed him. So this was Job 9:24 as well. So it was a time appointed where this blessing was gonna all right be fulfilled in Esau, and it happened, during the Renaissance, which you see in the beginning of that, all right, is during the Spanish Inquisition. Okay, go ahead.
Come, verse 40. And by the sword thou shalt live, and shalt serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion, thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck.
Yeah, so these devils, they was, the script say, they was loosed, all right, from the bottomless pit. We're speaking of, Eastern, what would be considered today, the Caucasus Mountains, over there towards the Ukraine area, Western Russia. Okay, and it was pushed off, to the side, while Jake, was ruling during the Dark Ages. You had, the Mongolian Empire during that time. You had the different Ishmaelite, they were making a little noise as the different caliphates, Islamic caliphates, and you had Persia. You still had the Parthians, they were still on the scene, but mostly it was Jake, in these positions, these high positions, within, all right, Europe, Russia, okay, but going back into it, it said that the devil will live by the sword. And how did that man come back into power in the Renaissance? What's the first thing he picked up with that sword? Okay, he picked up the Bible with it. Okay, but he picked up that sword first, man. Cause that's the devil's nature, is to rule by that sword. Okay, so he used the Bible, as a decoy. But the devil has always been, okay, about that sword. When you go into the devil history, the sword is always with him, and that's how the devil rules. Okay, it's through war and through the sword. All right. So did you have something else, bro?
Uh, yeah. We can do Jeremiah 13, come, bro. So like Jeremiah 13 and 23.
Okay, come. Yeah, it's a good one. Because he doubles, through their media and history, propaganda. They always try to present themselves in a different light. But nah, you're the devil. Okay, you're the wicked. You're the violent man. Okay, you inhumane. You see, I got it,
Mhm.
bro. It's Jeremiah 13 and 23. It said, "Can the Ethiopian change his skin, or the leopard his spot? Then may ye also do good that are accustomed to do evil."
Gun. Can an Ethiopian change his skin or the leopard his spots? The answer is no. Like it ain't possible. It says, then may ye also do good that are accustomed, that are kind of accustomed to do evil. So if it's in you, it's in this devil to rule by the sword, which is what you were gonna go, what you said earlier, bro. It's in him to rule by the sword. So that's his nature. That's the spirit that he was given. So that's what he's gonna go on to do. Esau, he's like an animal. The spirit that's in him, that's exactly what he's gonna do. It's not in him to do any good. So you niggas are haul up behind Trump about different things that he's doing. He gonna show his true colors on you real soon. But the point is, no matter how much they tried to whitewash everything, no matter how much they tried to say they're doing it, for the sake of good, or what was going into they want to civilize the region or civilize the earth. It's never been in him to do anything good since he was born. It was all predestinated.
Mm-hmm. And how he built, and a lot of Jake finna learn the hard way this time. All you niggas with Trump, okay? You nigga woman that look at this man as God, okay? You still, follow his philosophies, and you still operate off his reasoning. You're going to see, a lot of our people are going to see the devil. The Lord gonna make this man go retro on you niggas, man. Okay, and the Lord's gonna get the Lord has given this man power, okay, to judge, until he's judged, So yeah, man, this devil. Matter of fact, we'll end it on here.
So
Okay.
I had one more for you.
Okay, yeah, let's get Joe one more, and then we end it in Joe. What you got, bro?
Uh, Revelations 22 and 11.
Come, yeah, it's a good one too. Yeah, bro, what you got? It's the book of Revelation. Verse 22 and 11 says, "He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still."
And that sums up what you were saying earlier too about how we're not finna force nobody to believe anything or nobody to do anything, and also you ain't gonna force Esau to be good, or he's not gonna turn out to be some light bringer or whatever. So what the person that is gonna help you out or whatever you in. Esau is unjust. A lot of people out here that are very unjust. So we're gonna let them stay unjust. We're gonna let them stay filthy. If it's for you, if it's for you, if it's for you. If the Rakakwadash in you, how about Shema Shai gonna open it up, going into if you're holy, or if you're of that number, Baratazai, or if it's in you to even want to please you, how about Shema Shai, then that's gonna come out of you, and that's what you're gonna do. But we're gonna the point is we're gonna let everybody play the role that they're supposed to play. We ain't gotta force no hands. We ain't got to torture nobody. We ain't got to do nothing to nobody. We're gonna let everybody play the role that they was that is predestinated for them to play. And when we see how that's go, we're gonna revert it back to the scriptures, and we're gonna move accordingly.
Come on, bro. Beautiful said. Because you'll be going against the Most High trying to make somebody get it that ain't supposed to get it.
Mm-hmm.
So, we was never given, the order to do what these devils have done, under the banner of the Bible, you know. So let's get this and let's go to verse 4, Joel 20:4, and read verse 5.
This is the book of Job, chapter 2. You said verse 4 and 5, right?
Yeah, 4 and 5 Bible shop.
I got you. This is Job chapter 20, verses 4 and 5. It says, knowest thou not this of old, since man was placed upon the earth, that the triumphing of the wicked is short, and the joy of the hypocrite but for a moment.
Yeah, so we're in this short triumph of the wicked. Okay, and this is part of the comfort of the scriptures, knowing that the devil had but a short time. All right, and this hypocrite right now, he's been in his joy. He's been able to deceive the masses and present himself a particular way. He's been able to put blame on everyone else. He's been he's been in the seat of morality in the earth. To where he can decide what's inhumane, what's wicked, what's evil, what's good. But now, all right, we're in a time of true judgment where Yahweh Shai finna come judge in righteousness, man, and get everything in order. So, at the end of the day, the devil has his run. All right, the gig, the jig is up. Okay, the changing. All right, of rulership, the transitional rulership is in progress, and the devil finna lose, man. So that was the point. You had something else, bro? Before we shut it
No,
down?
I was just agreeing with you, bro.
Come on, bro. Well, we'll leave it there. Lord will, you brothers. All right, and you sisters edified once again. We want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Kakadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers. And peace and blessing, salutation, and hopefully shalom.
Shalom.